Great. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Off Script, which is a series of the Blue Room podcast. I'm MaryAnn McKibben Dana, and I write at the Blue Room on Substack. And we are running this series as a companion piece to my book, Better Than Normal: Virtues for an Off Script Life. But we are having a book talk today because my guest today had a book drop on the same day as Better Than Normal. And I have been following her work for a long time and anticipating the book. There they are, book twinsies.
Big twins.
So we are very thrilled to have Dr. Zed Zha with us. She is a physician, works in rural Washington State. And I want to talk about your book in a minute. But first, just tell us a little bit, what would you like us to know about you? Where do you serve? And also tell us about your Substack, too.
Yes, thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this whole time. My name is Zed, and I am a family physician. I call myself a country doctor because I'm out here in the country and doing rural medicine. I wrote a book called Consented, A Doctor's Call to End Medical Violence and Reclaim Patient Autonomy. And I have it. Thank you. I have a weekly Substack newsletter called Ask the Patient, because I believe when we don't know, patients are the people that we should turn, the experts of their own bodies that we should turn to. That's the gist of like why the Substack is called Ask the Patient. In the book I do touch on the subject of consent and this creation of a insidious, daily, invasive, harmful medical culture, which I call medical rape culture, that aims to take away people's bodily autonomy. And this isn't this isn't the action of a few like bad doctors who are criminals who like to violate patients. This is not. This is what we do day in and day out. The little things that we do to either label the patient, blame the patient, take away patients' real choices, withhold information in really small ways that we've been taught how to do from day one of medical training to the day we practice every day today. That really creates the illusion of consent.
Yeah,
and so that's what I
great.
aim to write against.
That's right. Well, and I have been making my way through Consented and highly recommend it. It is not at all just for physicians or people in the medical field. I have gotten a lot out of it as a patient, as someone who has to visit doctors, as someone who has children who have had mental health challenges, one of whom has a chronic illness which impacts mental health. And I want to just highly recommend the book. And I'm still making my way through it. And one of the reasons that that I'm still making my way through is because I'm really, I mean, it's weird to say that I'm savoring the book because it's a hard topic to tackle, and you really come at it so directly with so much compassion and care for your patients and a real desire to see some systemic change, which I am so grateful for.
Thank
But it's
you.
also it's kind of a satisfying read. It's one of those books where you're reading along and just feel so in such good hands, because I'm like, gosh, if we could have more doctors like this, I think there'd be such a powerful groundswell of change. So if you like reading those kinds of works from people who have bold ideas and a lot of heart and a really clear vision of how things could be different, I think it's really a wonderful read. So I really
Thank you.
appreciate you
Thank you for
talking to
saying
me.
that. Yeah, and I just want to point out something too. I know, I do agree. I think the book is a little Consented. It could be a little bit hard to read at times because I try to make it all encompassing to touch on all aspects of the harmful culture. And I think everyone at some point of their lives, either their loved one or themselves, has experienced something harmful in medicine, or and all of us, there's it's not an if, it's when we all become patients. All of us will become patients. And so I do want people to take care when they read the book. I would say that I put a lot of my own vulnerability into the book, which I think you do too in your books. It's a in my opinion, it's sort of it's my invitation to patients, readers, doctors, people in healthcare, people outside of healthcare, everyone to see me and other doctors as human beings and witness my growth from being brought up in a culture that teaches me to rewrite and overwrite people's bodily autonomy to my transformation to realize that I was doing at times more harm than good and coming to the other side, now standing with people radically with their bodily autonomy. So I think that transformation, I put it out there in the book, and I'm hoping people read it with care, but also hold my story with love, like I hold my
Yeah.
patient stories.
That's beautifully said. And just I mean, I think you do so well. Each, many of chapters kind of look at a particular kind of medical violence, or kind of, as you call it, medical rape culture, which is really taking away people's own agency and autonomy. I am reading right now the gender and sexual diversity chapter, which
Mm.
is really good timing. Happy Pride Month, everyone.
Happy
Um,
Pride Month.
yeah. So, but and I want to, in our conversation, we'll go back and forth, and I perhaps those of you who are joining us who've already read Better Than Normal can see the connections, and if you can't, we're going to get there. But to me, even as before I read your book, as I was following your notes and your work on Substack, I was like, "Whew, she is singing my tune." And we come at it from very different places as a kind of thinker, spiritual guide with folks through their lives, and you are guiding them and walking alongside them in a different kind of way, but with similar outcomes, hopefully. So
Mhm.
we'll get there in talking and bringing these books in conversation with each other. But before we do that, for those who are just like brand new, have not followed your work, can you give an example of what you mean by a system that doesn't respect that patient autonomy? And maybe a way to ask this is there a story that kind of crystallized for you? Oh, wow, this needs to change. This system is
Yeah.
not working. And there are so many examples in your book, so you could just pick any one. But oh, and we have a pup.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yay!
this is my my editor in chief.
Excellent. Yes, our cat, our
Her na-
animals really help us when we're doing writing.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
yeah.
I would say I like to go back to the story how I came to think about what I was doing to be harmful. Was this like moment where it was sort of a wake up moment that kind of span over years. But when I was, for those of you who don't know, it's to get into medical school is this like everyone knows it's sort of a crazy process, but the selection of medical school kind of positions people in a way that favors those people who have a lot of privileges, right? Like people who are able bodied, lots of time. Most of the time, thin-bodied, privileged enough to be able to devote most of their time studying and not living, not trying to make it work. And so a lot of times we have, and then of course, like people are good students who are like good, smart, whatever. So all of us enter medicine, not only a good student, but also in the selection process, the medical school admission favors people who volunteer a lot in the community, have good thoughts about like being a leader in the community, serving people. So people enter medical school, these like wholesome human beings who are like, I'm going to go and make a change. I'm going to radically advocate for patients, and so we all enter like that. And then little by little throughout the process, our that intention gets chipped away, and we get a little bit more callous than the day before, the day before. And so one of my first ever medical rotation, I was a brand new third year medical student. First 2 years of medical school, you sort of sit in the lecture hall. You don't really get to know real world. So this is my first real world experience as someone in medicine, just getting started. And of course, I was also a new immigrant at the time. I was about 6 years into my journey in the United States. So I had a little bit language barrier, a cultural barrier, and just not knowing what to do. And medical education is very hierarchical. So as the medical student, third year medical student, you're to be seen but not heard from. That's basically the gist of it. So I was a bright-eyed medical student, first day of rotation. Met a young patient who was 39 weeks pregnant. She was younger than me, and she was by herself. And my attending doctor, who was the teacher, at the highest on the hierarchy, was someone who has taken care of this patient for a long time, and for every single time. And then this was the first time that he decided he was going to do a cervical check, which means performing a vaginal exam to assess how ready the cervix is to give birth and how was she in labor. Today I know as a country doctor myself who delivers babies that when there is no medical indication that there's a healthy patient, a healthy pregnancy, no sign of labor, there's no medical emergency, there is no reason for us to really obtain that information. Like, we could keep our hands out of there, we keep out of people's business. And so I don't do it today, but for some reason, it was the routine. And patients, this young woman didn't know what was going on, didn't even know what a cervical check was supposedly consented for this process. So when we walked in, first time I met her, she was already half naked, paper drape over her. Now, it's weird to meet someone for the first time when they're half naked. It's just weird. Now, of course, like in medicine, it seems to be normal. This is what we do every day, right? But outside of medicine, this stuff is not normal. So I walk in and already very kind of like disoriented, and then the patient was too. Then the cervical exam began without the patient quite knowing what was about to happen, what this all meant, and how she was supposed to feel. So of course the exam didn't go well, and it was very painful, and there was a lot of struggle. The patient herself said multiple times, verbally and non-verbally, no. Like, this hurts. I want you to stop. So she said it verbally, and then she closed her legs, right? So these are all cues that she has withdrawn her consent. Arguably speaking, she never properly gave us consent. We never properly obtained informed consent because she was not informed. And instead of stopping, my attending used his elbows to push down the legs so that the exam could keep going. Instead of stopping, he said, "Relax, almost done." As if what's happening right in front of our eyes right now is not a person who is experiencing something that her body and her mind will remember for the rest of her life. As if instead in front of us was a task to be done, a check mark to be done, right? And so in that moment, as a person who also has a vagina, I was like feeling really visceral about this whole experience, and I felt traumatized, and I was kind of frozen in place. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, when I become an attending myself, when I grow up, I'm not going to be like this. This is not how I'm going to practice medicine. That's how I remember it happening. Until a few years later, I was a young country doctor who had a busy practice, and I was on call. Someone was in labor in the hospital. I was seeing patients, like 30, 40 patients a day, teaching medical students, teaching residents, and had like supervising physician assistants. Busy, busy, busy. And then I was in the middle. So I walked into a room, a 21-year-old woman who was about to have her first pap smear. Mm. And from the way she was sitting, I knew this was going to be a long visit. I was like, oh boy, she's nervous. So I did my best. I thought I was being a really radically feminist. I was like, I explained to her about what was about to happen. I showed her the speculum and did all the things. And then as the speculum went in, she tensed up. And then she said, ouch. And then she verbally said, stop. So it's sort of the same thing happening, except now many, many years later, and I was my own attending. And then instead of stopping and assessing what I could do to make her feel better, I told her, relax your butt into the bed. Mm. And then as soon as she did, I shoved the speculum further. Mm. And then I said, I'm almost done. Mm-hmm. So as I exited the room that day, I was throwing my glove into the trash, and in that moment of like my attending many years ago, who threw his own dirty glove into the trash and he made a comment about this patient, that's the moment when it come back to me. And I was like, oh my goodness. I swore one day before that I was never going to become someone like this. And I just literally became that. And
Mm,
that's the moment when I realized that something happened in the past few years of my career that chipped away that like idealistic, bright-eyed young medical student who set out to do good. And I became exactly who I didn't want to become.
mm, mm. Thank you for sharing that, and I think that's such a great example for folks for whom this is a new kind of way of thinking about medicine and thinking about our own agency and autonomy as humans who visit doctors, right? And what I appreciate about that story and what resonates with me as well is that I think, like Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. And I feel like in your work, you let me ask you if this is the case, because it is very much the case for me in the writing that I do. I'm often writing to myself first and the things that I need to know, remember, think about so that I can stay accountable to my own values of what I think I want to put into the world. So I feel like I wonder if that's true for you as well, is like, I mean, of course you want to see change happen and I do as well in the work that I put in the world, but this is also your own way of keeping yourself accountable to, this is the kind of physician that I want to be and to be
Yes.
part of a solution in a better way.
Yeah, very much so. And I think you're very like reflective in your writing. Like you're always self-inspecting. And
Mhm.
some of the stories that you put in your book, like little things that you observe in the, in the airports, and that really makes you think. Little moments like that. I think people who are sensitive, people who are introspective, hold on to
Mhm.
those things, and we use those as sort of a mirror to like look at ourselves first. Um, a lot of times, consented is kind of my own way, my own reckoning with like who I was before and who I would like to be, who I like to see myself be in the future, and who I like to teach the future doctors to be. And so, sometimes now that the book is out there, um, sometimes I find myself, where everyone is so burnt out in medicine. Like I'm still in institutional medicine where I'm still like I'm in the meat grinder right now. Like I'm
Mhm.
still seeing 35 to 40 patients a day and doing all these things. And then so sometimes you get so burnt out, especially toward the end of the day, you resort back to the old way of
Mhm.
thinking,
Mhm.
and then I automatically go back to the labels that
Mhm.
I learned how to throw at people.
Mhm.
When I catch myself thinking, "Ah, this is a difficult patient. This patient is non-compliant. This patient is traumatic." When I go back to these labels that I right now fight to abandon, um, that's when I know I'm too burnt out to be a good
Mhm.
doctor.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
almost like now I'm holding a mirror in front of me, and then I think, listen, that's not the person who wrote Consented anymore. We need to slow down, take a breather, and like maybe restart.
Mm. That's such a beautiful way of modeling what I'm just glad to hear you say that, because so often I'll just speak for myself. When I do digress from my own sense of values and what I hold dear and the integrity that I hope to bring to my parenting, my being a pastor, a writer, the various roles that I where I do sometimes, it's easy to get into self-punishing mode, right? Oh,
Yes.
I missed the mark again. And that is not what's going to get us back into our best selves, if we want to put it that way. And that is to breathe, to recognize the burnout, to do what we can to mitigate that and to be kind to ourselves. And there's so much of that modeling in your book as well and in your work in general. Um, and so I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And so let's kind of, put these two kind of books again. Our book twinsies
My
that
big
came
twins,
out
yeah.
April
Same day.
14th, came out the same day. But like, as you have read and those who've read it know, like what I'm trying to get us to do, and I'm working on a kind of big picture values and kind of feel more philosophical concept, is thinking about what are the values that we can bring to a world that does want to label people as non-compliant, or or to judge people who make what we think are poor decisions about their lives, their health, their care, and thus marginalize them as a result, as opposed to seeing the dignity and that we're all doing the best that we can, right? And so the values of curiosity, I mean, that's just
Yes.
so infused in your book. Courage, I mean, the fact that you wrote it, I want to ask you at some point in our conversation what the reaction has been among the kind of medical establishment to it. And the idea of presence, which I think even in that chapter, I do talk about work that I did with med students at GW. I
Mm.
was a psychosocial mentor for a small group, and they were working with a standardized patient at one point. And
Oh,
for
yes,
those who
yes,
haven't
yes.
read this section, they're learning how to break bad news. And this lovely young woman, who I'm sure is just a fine doctor today, kind of barrels through this kind of, you've got a stage 2, blah, 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 blah. I mean, and it was clearly she was reading the script, right? "Oh, I need to get
Yes.
this information
Yes.
across." And the standardized patient, for those who don't know, is an actor who's um, supposed to kind of react in the moment to what they're hearing as a real person would. And so she just gets her dander up. She's like, "What do you? This isn't possible. What And this kind of denial sort of
Mhm.
wall comes up, and so we stop, we give everybody a minute, and I say, "What if you just start with just the basic info and then stop for a minute and then
Mm.
go on, instead of just getting all the info out first thing?" And the interaction totally changed. And that's just a small I mean, the power of presence, and that is also so evident in your book and in your work, Zed, that um, to the extent that the system allows you with 35 to 40 patients a day, you want to be as fully present as you can, and you're gonna pick things up that you won't if you are just trying to get through as quickly as possible to the next person. So anyway, that was why I saw some connective tissue between our 2 books,
For
in
sure.
addition to having, them come out on the same day. Um, so curious, I
I
mean,
I
reactions
I
to that, yeah.
I also wanna add, I think, like, um, sometimes, your book, talking about better than normal, because normal, this is such a triggering word, right? Like, we in medicine, like, we just love to define what's normal. We
Yeah.
love to say this is normal. Now we have to remember, normal doesn't look like you and I. Like, normal was never defined by people who look like you and I.
That's
Never,
true.
or for people. And even if it was, a lot of times normal works, they are a statistical average. And
Mhm.
by definition, an average has variations. No one exactly looks like that, right?
Right.
And so I think that the fact that, so sometimes, like, when I think about, is this normal, or like, what is normal, who define
Yeah.
normal, who gets to ongoing define what's normal, what's abnormal, is what really reminds me. And the other thing is, a lot of times, like, when we say normal, when we say, sometimes that bleeds into other like concepts that overlap in medicine. Like, we say normal is a good patient,
Mhm.
is a compliant patient, is a patient who follows the script, is a patient who does exactly what we say. It's a patient who remembers everything, who organizes everything, who advocates for themselves, and all these things. And the thing is, once we start going to the realm of not data driven normality, we start to judge people. We start to morally define people. So now, I don't know about you. I did not go to school for moral judgment. I don't know the first thing about, like, no one taught me about what's the like, morality standard. I know about medical
Yeah.
standards. I know about, like,
Mm.
medical practice. I was not taught to morally judge people. Now, sometimes I think, oh, I do know someone who potentially do have the training to morally judge people. Like, MaryAnn is a whole pastor. I feel like morality, when we talk about morality, like, are we talking, we're kind of like stepping into religion. But even she refuses to conform to normality, refuses that, like, normal
Yeah.
be authentic. Like, who am I
Mhm.
to do that in my line of work? So it's
Right,
been very
right.
inspiring reading your work, to be honest.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate, I feel like, um, given the predominance in the culture of a different kind of faith that is very judgmental. I mean, yes, day 1 of Pride Month, which means we're gonna get all kinds of ugly stuff being said about
Mm.
people and their own dignity and worth, and so when I do introduce myself to people like you, I'm always like, "How do I let her know that I'm this kind of pastor person?" Right? And if you read my work, you hopefully know that that is, I mean, what I'm hoping to do is just really lift up a world that is very expansive and inclusive of a lot of different ways of being, and that to me is where my spiritual grounding comes, is to say, let's draw the circle as wide as we can. So thank you for approaching it and being willing to have this conversation, because it's true that especially in kind of younger generations, there's a very healthy skepticism. So thank you for hanging with me in
And the other
that.
thing I wanted to say,
Yeah,
the other thing I realized, I was like, right away, I knew you were a safe person. I knew that because like you
yeah,
had invited me to have a conversation. Of course, like I knew this is you're a safe person in many, many regards. But I was also reading as in a very kind of like in a moment, and I maybe like a literary person, like a nerdy way. I when you quoted Rebecca Solnit in your book of like men explain things to me, I was like, okay, we have a pastor who quotes Rebecca Solnit. I think we're safe.
yes, I adore her. In fact, she's kind of one of my kind of, I would love to, what kind of career would I like to emulate, or the kind of work I want to put in the world? It's hers. She is so full of hope and humor and sees the world clearly, but is not willing to be cynical about it. And yeah, she's just the best. I adore her. So we have kindred spirits there. Um, so as you seek to be, to put it in a cliche way, the change you want to see in the world, in the way that you are with your patients, in the way you write about it, in the way you ask for input in Ask the Patient, on social media and in the book also. Um, what has been, what is the hardest, how do I want to put this? Like, what gets in your way? You mentioned burnout. That's one of the things that kind of, when you snap back to that default of like, this is what it means to be a doctor, it's kind of a sign of burnout. Are there other systems or structures that are in place that kind of get in your way or make it hard
Oh my
to do
gosh.
this?
I feel like everything pits me against my patient. I mean, these days, like we're talking about private equity being in the middle of like everything. We're talking about capitalism, talking about like big insurer, big pharma, everything.
Mhm.
So like, of course, like people don't know how the system works. I don't know how the system works. So they don't see the big pharma, the big forces that's pitting us against each other. So when, especially in my patient, I work with the patients who are very traumatized community, very underserved. I think like probably more than 50% of my patients are on Medicare and Medicaid, and then a very big percentage of patients who are uninsured.
Mhm.
And so people who have already face challenges, they already get ostracized, and they already get disenfranchised, and so they see me as another person who stands for the system. And so when they get frustrated, what do they don't think like to call the pharmaceutical companies who like hire more reps than we have
Mhm.
like nurses who like staff
Yeah.
a ER. They blame me. And so in a way, recently I remember fighting for this so stupid thing called prior authorization. I'm sure you're very familiar with that,
Yep.
which is basically a permission for me to ask the insurance companies to do my job. Like, can I
Mhm.
please do my job with your permission before I proceed? Right, as if like I'm not the one practicing medicine. And
Right.
so you get the prior authorization, and then like automatically, once you go above a certain dollar amount, you get automatic denial. This is like just, and so most people don't fight the denial, and then that's how they get away with it. So I make a point in my practice and my team that if other people's patients who are more like privileged, who come from like a privilege, if they get this medicine, my patients get the medicine. Like
Mhm.
whatever other people's patients deserve, mine should deserve the same. So we make a point to fight every single denial. And if I get a new denial letter that I haven't seen before, that sometimes they come up with these new strategies to deny you.
Yep.
I don't think of it as like, oh God, here's another one. I sometimes I do, but a lot of times I'm like, oh great, like new thing, perfect. Let me study this paper, this letter, so I can strategically attack that, like tackle that every single time, ongoing. So anyway, so recently I was calling the insurance company like after this is like during lunch hour, and then at some point they said, um, at some point they told my pharmacist who was like helping me with the prior authorization to see my credential. They
Mm.
were like, um, "Can does she have the a credential to prescribe this medicine?" So my pharmacist is a PharmD, like a PhD level provider as well, and then like I'm an MD, and then so the two of us looked at each other, we're like, you know what? We should be asking this question to the person on the phone who like is like denying our
Amazing.
appeal right now. Let me see your credential. Like,
Right.
okay, if are you truly what's happening is that when you are practicing medicine
Mhm.
without a license right
Yeah.
now, right?
Mhm.
Without seeing my patient, without being with my patient, without witnessing what this has affected their
Mhm.
entire family life. You
Right.
are practicing medicine without a license. By definition, that's fraud. And for you to have the audacity to ask me for we ended up having to fax over my graduation like certification to this from fellowship to this pharmaceutical like person, and I was like, this is so insulting to a point that like it's
Mhm.
beyond anger, and
Yeah.
that really got me like really mad. And I think for the rest of the day, I was just in this really bad mood, and you know what, that kind of stuff spills over to patient care. It shouldn't be, but it does because we're all human. And
Mhm.
they know that. The system knows that very well. They
Yeah.
knows that very well. Sometimes we say healthcare is broken, but arguably speaking, healthcare is functioning exactly how it's supposed to function. It
Yeah.
functions in a way so that I am perpetually in a bad mood. I'm
Yeah.
perpetually pissed off. And
Mhm.
then I become perpetually impatient with my patients.
Yeah.
And then we spend less and less time together. We have more conflicts. The more we fight, the more they benefit.
That's right. And that's the other connection between these 2 books, right, is that the as we hear again and again in a variety of venues, this is the system working as designed. It's not broken. It is doing what it was designed to do. Whether it is insisting that kids need to conform to a 7-hour school day followed by several hours of homework, and if you can't hack that, you cannot succeed academically. You've fallen out of that compliance of what it means to be a successful student, or any of
Hmm.
a number of different examples, and so, yeah, I mean, I'm pumping my fist at the way that you're. I love that you see it as a challenge. I mean, we kinda have to
We
to
have
sort of,
to, yeah.
yeah, to make change in the world, we've gotta kind of see it as a kind of a problem to solve and a kind of
Hmm.
a creative challenge, but yeah, it gets,
It
of
gets
course, it
us. It
gets
gets
really,
us.
yeah.
And then, and then I remember thinking, I'm so mad. So I asked my medical assistant, like, can you say something? Can you teach me something right now? Like, how I have a really bad attitude right now. Can you say something to like bring me back to normal? And
Mm,
I asked her,
mhm,
and she says, this is just a job. So, and so
mhm,
she said that, and I was like, oh, that is true. But
yeah,
you know what? Is it just a job though? Is
yeah,
is what you do just a job? Is what I do just a job? Like, did we come into this profession to just do a job? Perhaps in a way, in a way to avoid exploitation by the
mhm,
system. Yes, there should remain a job. Yes, but like no one. works 80 hours a week in medical residency day in and day for like years and getting paid so little just to get through, just so that they can do a job, right? Like
Yeah.
isn't this supposed to be my passion? Isn't this
Mhm.
supposed to be part of my identity? And then
Yeah.
for like all this to happen so that I can arrive at a conclusion that I'm quietly quitting my passion because I'm just performing a job is
Right.
kind of what they want
Yeah.
to do.
That's right. That absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we've got a great comment in the chat here of, we should make it illegal to interfere with a patient accessing health care. That said, we need a more very progressive Congress to pass a law like that, one that isn't swayed by insurance lobbies. So
Yes.
we've got and I think I can sometimes, I'm sure you can too, even though we again live in very different domains, just it feels so overwhelming that in some ways it gives I do feel a sense of compassion for people who are like, you know what? This is the way it's built and I don't have the energy to fight it. And so I just am gonna go along. I don't ultimately accept that, but I understand why people feel that way. And also, again, this is why I love that you put this out in the world is like you are doing what you can. And I'm also like, how on earth did you find time to write a book with everything that you have? I mean, people ask me the same thing, but
Yes, yeah, I always do the same thing.
and part of it is a sense of mission and calling, I think. I mean, medicine is a calling, ministry is a calling. There are a lot of fields that are a calling, but this is also writing towards the world that we want to see is a calling as well. So we do what we can, so to the person who made that comment, yeah, it feels like so impossible. And also, uh, gosh,
Yeah,
we just do all do what we can.
big
Yeah.
money is at play when it comes to
Yeah.
like who gets to influence campaigns, like who gets to
Right.
influence policy making. Um,
Yeah.
it's not until angry patients and angry doctors become angry voters
Mhm.
that's when things
Yeah.
start to shift.
That's right. That's right. Couple more questions for you. This has been such a treat. I'm curious, like, is there a particular value or practice that kind of helps you stay true to the kind of physician that you want to be? Just what sort of keeps you on track to be this kind of doctor?
You know what? I think like one of the things is that a lot of my team members and then people around me at work also have read my book. So it helps that
Yeah.
it helps if I start behaving in a way that's not what I wrote about in the book. And I'm like, okay, I'm being a hypocrite right now. And I think everyone sees that. I better like so I
Yes,
do think that moral compass should be shared with people.
that's
That does
great.
help. And the other thing is like my patients are very, very amazing. Like I have such an easy job in that sense because my patients are so immensely grateful and they're like there's a culture like my patients are primarily Latina community immigrants, so people who I already identify with. They are
Mhm.
from a different culture, but there's so much like shared whole cultural humility that I think like I as someone who's an outsider gets to have like I could claim to not know something and have it be totally normal. So one way I invite people to um, be empowered to know that they are the expert in their own bodies is I would ask them a question about something totally unrelated of to medicine.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's like the first thing that I do.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'll come in and crack a joke, or like sometimes I'll be like, oh my gosh, like um today is like it's Cinco de Mayo. Like, what does this mean? Like, can you teach me something? Inviting people to teach me something. The other thing I sometimes do is I've been in the position where like a lot of traditional food like cooking in Asian culture very has strong smell, and like because we like open fire and things like that. So
Yep.
sometimes in the past it has happened when people comment on how I smell like
Mm.
food.
Mhm.
And then it's always this point of like shame, almost like, oh shoot,
Mm.
I'm not American enough. Like this is like
Mhm.
kind of embarrassing. So a lot of times like it's so obvious that sometimes someone who like come in at 6 p.m. and they're just eating dinner and they smell like heaven. They smell
Mhm.
so good. And so
Yes.
I'll come in, I would positively comment, embrace that smell. And it's like, oh my gosh, smell like you just made something really delicious. Can you tell me what you had? And then we start talking about something. Um, or sometimes I'll say like, "Oh, you live with your mom. Like, what's your secret to get along with your like other generations?" So when people start to teach me things, I think
Mhm.
that's they accept that invitation
Yeah.
for that power. So I think that
Yes.
flips the power dynamic just a little bit, sometimes enough
Sure
for them to
does.
open up to me and trust me.
That's beautiful. And it also connects to a couple of other values in the book that I talk about. So the idea of authenticity and beauty, those are later in the book, but like you are being your authentic self with them, that it's not just a transactional, I'm here to be the expert doctor, but we are human beings encountering one another in
Oh
this
my gosh,
journey of
yeah.
life, and then the beauty, right? To say, um, this delicious cooking smell because you just made dinner and are coming in towards the end of the day. I mean, like that's just affirming their own humanity and beauty as
Yeah.
well. That's more pieces of that. And so just beautiful. Love that. Final question is so you had that kind of transformational moment with your attending. And even though later you recognized it in yourself, you're like, "Ooh, I became the thing that I was fighting against and brought yourself back." Something your eyes were already opened enough to know that's not the way you wanted to be. So I'm curious who or what in your life, your past, your experience, where did that come from? The desire to do it differently and to know from the minute you walked into that first experience with your attending that's not who I'm gonna be. That's not who I wanna be.
Well, I kind of like, okay, so I am I'm a Chinese woman who is a doctor. Like that's very cliche, right? Like I feel like, but and people like we have this sort of a generational, like societal, cultural pressure to be a doctor, get a PhD, whatever, all these things. So sometimes I think about is like, what do I want? What I really want to be like? If I given the chance, like without all this pressure, without being the only child in my family, like, what would I be if I didn't have the burden of taking care of my parents, like all these other things? Like, I think I would have loved to be a stand-up comedian, like make people laugh. And so one thing that really doesn't resonate with me about medicine is how freaking serious we are. We take ourselves so seriously. We think we like you can't even crack a joke with people. Sometimes you're attending like you're just this like really timid, afraid person. So
Yep.
that doesn't really sit well with me. And it's so not on brand with me to a point that it just takes me out of context right away. So
Yep.
I think that in a sense, that's easy for me to come in and be like, you know what? Whatever happened before in that results in your medical trauma, it's a different version of medicine, how I like to practice. It's also a different version of people. Like
Mhm.
I just never set out to be like that. So in a way that's easy. So I use a lot of humor in my practice and a lot of times we're like laughing about things and I think that of course like cliche the way to say laughter is a great medicine, right?
It sure
And so
is.
in a way, once I remember who I really set out to be, which is a stand-up comedian, then then it becomes easy.
That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah. That there can be joy even in this maddening world that lifts up such kind of limited and unhelpful and unhealthy ways of being with one another. I love that you lean into that joy and different way of looking at the world. So
What
beautiful.
do you do to keep yourself from
Oh my gosh,
emotionally burning out?
yeah, that's a great question. I think I try to bring a lot of humor to it as well. I mean, I 2 books ago, I wrote a book about improvisation, and it just kind of as a life practice, like when things do not go according to plan. I mean, I'm sure in your works that are just improvising all day long. Like somebody walks in, you have no idea what their
Oh yeah.
presenting issue will
You're
be,
right.
right? What their challenge, what are they going through? And so that interactive, kind of process of learning about them and how do I build trust with this person who is deeply skeptical and I represent this system that is so broken and that has done such violence to them, that's a creative challenge. So I guess keeping the creativity, um, and also I loved what you said earlier in the conversation about having put this out in the world. You now have people that can help you, in a loving way, I'm sure, but just stay true to yourself, right?
Yeah, prevent hypocrisy.
And say exactly, right. I wanna
I
be
think you're
congruent.
I think you're really funny. I see little places that you say things, I'm, like, chuckling along with.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Back at you. And that is a good place to promote your work again, folks. Check out Dr. Zed Zha. She is at Ask the Patient, and her book is Consented. Thank you so much for your time today, for your wisdom. Thank you for the work that you're doing to make the world more equitable and
Thank
more
you.
more loving. To just put it really
Better than
really
normal.
simply. That's right. That's right. Let's do it. Let's do it. Thank you so much for being out
Thank you,
there.
thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you all again next time. And thanks for being here.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.